Welcome to the third session of our storytelling series. My name is Mark Loeb. I'm the president of Integrity Shows. We produce this series as well as 6 or 7 art fairs every year. This session will be led by Vicki Elmer. Let me tell you about her. Vicki is a journalist who's worked with many papers and magazines, including Washington Post and New York Times. She's been an editor and a journalist her entire career, and she is also married to me, oddly enough.
So, it is odd.
Yes.
It's odd.
So she's going to be leading today's session. So I'll turn it over to Vicki then.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I don't know where you're at, but we're having a beautiful fall day in Detroit, and it's so tempting for me to just run outside and play, but I'm not. So as Mark said, I've been an editor for about half of my career as a journalist, which is a pretty long career. Started back in the late 80s, early 90s, and took me all over the country, actually, as a journalist. And let me tell you that editing is a distinct step. It's a unique skill set. And it is not something everyone can do. It requires concentration, focus, and time. And I understand that not everybody is going to be able to edit their own stories and artist bios, but I'm trying to give you some pointers to get started on this. Let me tell you a little more about myself. I was an editor at the Detroit Free Press, and I was an editor in New York at Newsday, and I was always known as the crazy creative editor who had, surprising ideas and contrarian approaches to things. And then I left editing. It became very demanding, and I became a freelance writer. For the Washington Post, and still freelance for them occasionally, Fortune Magazine, New York Times, and others. More recently, I've done some editing for MIT, and I've also done some editing for some artists who are applying for major grants. I'm the co-founder of Mid Artist Guild, and that's a small nonprofit. I'll tell you a little more about it later. And I also do some career and creativity coaching from time to time. So that's a bit about me, kind of a crazy creative person. So I like to start with quotes. So I found this quote and I loved it. I'm writing a first draft and reminding myself that I'm simply shoveling sand into a box so that later I can build castles. I think that when you're preparing a story or an artist statement or a description of your work, you have to be prepared that the first draft of whatever you do is just that simple pulling it together, the shoveling together of things, and go back with it later. So one of the things that is important when you're working on developing your stories is to know your why. Why are you telling this story? What are you hoping it will accomplish? What is the purpose of putting the story out there in the world? What do you hope that the recipients, the listeners, will do after they hear your story? Are they supposed to buy your art? Are they supposed to subscribe to your newsletter? Are they supposed to get more engaged and come to your show? Knowing your purpose and your why is an important step in identifying and choosing the right stories that you're going to share with your audiences. So this is the moment where we ask a couple of you if you have a story you'd like to share, and then we will all collectively give you just a minute or two of feedback. So who has a short story they would be willing to share? Thank you.
Yes, Erica.
One definition of the word Zen is to see or contemplate. This is a lost art, the ability to pause and experience a moment of Zen, where you are deeply present in the moment. People often forget to truly observe. To combat this, my intention is to produce images that elicit a feeling of intrigue, enchantment, and tranquility in the heart and mind of the observer. These unembellished, spontaneous images bring you the essence of what I saw through the lens, with subjects that range from nature to nostalgia. And when my photo resonates with you, it fulfills what I believe is one of the most important things about being human: to experience moments you want to put into a frame, to pause and observe again and again. So with my zestful butterfly spirit, I am on a quest for my art to become your moment of Zen.
Really nice. And what is your purpose with that? What are you hoping that will do?
To convey to my audience, whether that is a potential customer, a judge at an art fair, the essence of my spirit and my purpose and my passion in trying to bring images forth from my spirit.
Very nice. Okay, so I'd like to hear from a couple of the people. What did you guys think of that? What is there? Anyone want to give a minute of feedback to Erica?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought that I don't know what her art is. I don't know what it looks like, but I think it's probably very nice and calm and soothing. So I think that the message was a good one, if that's what your art looks like. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
So I thought you got a whole lot of information in there, and it may have been multiple stories. And what I mean by that is the first story is the catching their attention, and then a detail story about one of the pictures or about your passion or something. It felt like there was so much information in there that it may have been difficult for me as a casual shopper to stop and feel like I'm in a relationship already.
Okay.
And I felt the same thing. I felt like maybe that would be the long version of something you would have, and it would be great if you could tighten that down and maybe make it about half the number of words and have a much shorter version to share.
Okay.
Remembering that attention spans are, short these days.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a progressive story where what you're doing is you're getting their interest and eliciting a response. And that way, when you go into that next part, they're already invested.
What is your advice with respect to conveying one's, I guess, that essence of one's portfolio when it has a variety and that's what people like about it? So for instance, I have some people absolutely love the intricacy of macro flowers like an iris, or some people love my black and white nostalgia images, or some people like my scenes from Argentina and Brazil and France. Some people love my beach scenes from right here at Assateague, Maryland. So, and that's what one of the judges who gave me an award last year said that he was drawn to, that there was a variety. And that's what I hear from my customers all the time as well.
Yeah. So you did a pretty good job of saying from X to Y, I forget, from the nostalgia to something. So giving people a sense of your range in just a few words can be a valuable thing to show the variety, the eclecticness of who you are and what your work is about. And then you brought it back to it's all about these calm wonderful moments that will be, living on in the frame in your home. So that was, I thought, worked pretty well, to do that. Yeah.
And what you might also look at is it gives you an option to connect. Like, I've got these 5 different series and different people love different ones. Is there one that particularly draws you in? And then the story of that series becomes maybe the important one for that moment.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks for being brave and going first.
I have one. I don't know.
Cool. Thanks, Jill.
Okay. I love turtles, and my husband and I have been scuba diving in the Caribbean many times, and we're always so excited when we saw a turtle swimming near us. They're so beautiful. And I decided finally to get a turtle on canvas in my usual manner of my little squares, creating like a big mosaic. And I created a big one. It was 48 by 36. And I was, as usual, in a rush to meet a deadline for a show, and I entered in the Art Center Sarasota, and it won a prize. But also a couple of days later, the curator called me and told me that it had sold. And I was very happy, of course, to hear that it had sold. But I was also a little bit disappointed because typically I get to spend some time with my art before I send it off. I like to have it on the wall for a week or so just to kind of see how it looks and tweak it if I can. I didn't have a chance to do that. But, like everything else, you have to move on and accept things for how they are. So I did. But about a month later, I got an email from the person that bought that turtle. I'll read that to you. It says, Jill, I bought the sea turtle you made that was at Art Center Sarasota. It's hanging in my big beachy kitchen, and I can honestly say it brings me joy every time I look at it. Green, purple, and blue are my favorite colors, and I don't know if they told you or not at the center, but I'm a turtle rescuer. Every year I pluck 35 to 40 Mississippi cooters, softshell, and snapping turtles out of the roads. Once, I believe, I even communicated telepathically with a cooter who thanked me for saving him from near death on Clark Road. But back to your art. I love, love, love the turtle you made. If my house was about to be blown away, I'd grab my beagle, Nosy Rosie, in one hand and your painting in the other. I will treasure it till the day I die, and my family will inherit it after that. It is so very, very cool. Thank you so much for making it. Now, when I got that email, I was so overwhelmed with joy myself. And that really, for me, is the purpose of creating art, to bring joy for myself. And when you can share that joy and bring memories from another scene of her holding a big old turtle and running across the road with it versus me in a scuba gear swimming, it's perfect. Yeah, so there you go.
Do you have a photo of the painting?
Yes, it's on my website, jilltheartist.com.
Nice. And Jill, how might you use that story, the kind of your love of turtles and then her love of turtles? How would you use that? What's the purpose?
Well, I think that the whole purpose is just that we all have memories, within our life, and that we all can see the same painting or photograph, and for each and every one of us it elicits different images or memories, and I think that's how I would use it, so to speak. I really feel it's important to have something on your wall that you love, not necessarily something that matches the couch, but something that brings you joy. And so that's kind of where it's at.
I could see it. Yeah, I could definitely see an abridged version of that with the permission of the email writer, the buyer, on your website, to show the joy of the connection you had with her through the turtle, through the art, through your love of turtles. as a testimonial to joy and to the beauty of your you connecting with your buyers, and maybe, you know, if she would be willing to send you a picture of her in the kitchen with it, you could really make a very nice testimonial story on your website.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, she sent me a picture a couple of days later. We corresponded, but it was of her dog, Nosy Rosie.
Like, funny.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was thinking, it was about a year ago now. But I mean, it was such an incredible email. That's what you would dream of.
Yeah.
I'm gonna reach out to her. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I think and having those stories from someone else about your art it's a really important way of showing the impact of your art in their lives. And so that's a real gift to be given that and be able to, with her permission, share it on your email or in your website, or however you choose to do that. And it might be interesting to find out from her, a few other details about her turtle rescue. You know, if there's a turtle rescue nonprofit, you could link to that, or, kind of extend the story even further if you wanted to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But that's a really lovely story.
Yep.
Anybody else have some thoughts?
So Jill, I think the letter was a great example of what we were calling a customer story.
Yes.
And I don't think that you need to do the whole letter. I think you can offer just a few pieces. And while the turtle was such a good connection in it, since most of your work isn't turtles, I wouldn't necessarily focus that much on that element, because you want the element that works for her and for you is the joy of having it there on the wall every day.
Yep.
And her saving it versus, everything else in the house. It's the beagle and the painting.
Yeah. And passing it on to her heirs. I agree. Unless you're going to do a whole series of turtle paintings, you may want to edit it a little bit. But
so Jill is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Derek.
Jill, are your pieces, most of your pieces, mosaics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you, I do other things, but I'm trying to focus. It's hard, but that's what I like to do the most.
I love the joy in it. I'm sorry, Jill, that's the part that really came out to me, was joy. And I think that if you can elicit that's going to give people promise,
Yeah.
Why do people buy my work? For joy. Well, what do you mean? It's beautiful work. But no, what happens is, here, let me read this. People get joy out of it every time they look at it. There's something in there. And if you need a little more joy in your life.
Joy to the walls. That's my newest thing, yeah.
Sure.
That's
So
great.
they were mentioning about the focus on the turtle versus not. And that's why I asked my question about mosaics, because I got a beautiful image in my mind of what it must look like. But then as a potential customer, I thought, I wonder what other mosaics that she has. I wonder if she has a butterfly, or I wonder if she has one of, the Colosseum in Italy, or, it made me wonder.
Yes. They're paint mosaic, by the way. Yes, it's like a collage with paint on. Yes, I get you. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I have a short, funny story. I had a collector, he owed me some money for this particular painting. And as he was hanging it, the painting fell off the wall and hit him in the head. And he called me up and told me, hey man, this painting hit me in my head. He was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to give you, pay you your money right now. So that's the story.
So who would you like to tell that story to?
Anyone who owes me money.
Yeah, that's
good.
true.
That's good.
That's a good point.
Yep. 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 Let your paintings speak for you. Pay me. Pay me.
Be a good story too if somebody's buying a piece and you're giving them some time to pay for it, is say, hey, now I got to warn you, this has happened before. So make sure you're paying me on time. I don't want my painting to attack you.
Yeah, no, it's a funny little story, and it would be good for people who owe you money or who are going to be paying you monthly or whatever. As long as you can, tell they have a little bit of a sense of humor. You might not try it with the CPA. There's some CPAs who seem to have no sense of humor.
Except the ones that might be on this Zoom, of course.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. I love that story. I think it's hilarious, and I think you could maybe expand it into, that all art and my art have powers that you don't even know about. You could really have some fun and expand it a little bit. Not just owing money, but just the powers and the mystery of art. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Yes, my paintings are voodoo hoodoo.
All right. Oh,
It's giving power to the painting is a great thing because that's very enticing.
Yeah, I like that. I'm writing that phrase down. Power to the paintings. Or, yeah, yeah, and maybe that would be something you would want to do. Around, dare I say it, Day of the Dead or Halloween, or a time when people are thinking about the magic powers, or some other time, a full moon or something else. It would be fun to share something like that.
I think we've got time for one more story, and then Vicky's going to tell you some hints about how to edit. Anybody else want to?
This is Ron Headings,
Hey, Ron.
and I do wired tree sculptures. So this is an example of my work here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things that I've found is very effective from a story standpoint is when someone looks at one of my pieces and says, oh, look at that. I can share with them the background about where that rock came from. And for instance, this rock came from our travels in the state of Utah. And I always start with the rock, and I share with them that the tree itself, the artwork, actually is inspired by the base. And so based on this particular rock, it's got some red in it. It looks like an igneous rock. It looks like it came out of the Utah desert. And so the tree that goes on it then is a scraggly old tree that grows very low to the ground, that's trying to pick up every last shred of water it can find in the ground. And it's very gnarly. And that background of the process of creating the tree seems to resonate with a lot of people, because eventually it leads to not just the story of the process, but the benefit for the buyer, in that this is a unique piece of art because it starts with a unique rock. And I can never create the same piece twice because I never start with the same rock.
Well, the word organic just keeps coming to mind as something that you could use in that as part of that description.
Yeah, and what I thought was the backstory of how you found the rock, and how it became part of your art, the art you make, is an important part of sharing who you are as an artist. You were camping in Utah for 7 days and almost ran out of water one day. And on one of those days, you found these rocks, and you were so glad that you did, but you also would wished you found 3 extra bottles of water or whatever. I'm always interested in the backstories behind objects and people and connections too. So I think that would be, and I assume that your hope is that by connecting people, then they want to take it home. It's a sale. You're selling this to them, and you're
Exactly. They often ask then, well, where did you find this rock, and where did this rock come from? Each one has a different story.
I've got a weird idea. I don't know if it's feasible, and that would be if you could take a Polaroid of each rock where you find it and kind of glue it to the bottom so that it becomes even more of the story for them. Some other comments for Ron, please?
I think I just love that whole idea of having a one rock and then you make that one tree and the whole story behind that. It's great. Yeah, I really like that. It's fun. Maybe you can get a QR code, which I'm really into now, and link it to your website and put it on the bottom of the rock.
Now, one of the things I wonder, Ron, is do you sell directly then, mostly directly through art fairs and events, or do you sell at galleries? And if you're at a gallery, do you write the stories down, or how do you get the stories to the potential buyers if you're not there?
I mostly sell through art fairs, and so I'm there, but I do have some in galleries. I have not written the stories out, though, and I appreciate that comment because that could be an opportunity.
Yep. Or you could also do a short video and have, as we said, a QR code and a video of you sharing the story of finding the rock, because that would even, for some people, the story might resonate more if they saw you talking about it and holding it. You know, it's a way of connecting with people when you can't be there to tell the story in person. And it's a good way of, you know, again, engaging them and possibly buying your work. So let's move on, and we'll talk about a few techniques and do's and don'ts of editing. And we're going to start with some story killers. And sorry, I couldn't resist this, so close to Halloween. Some things that really can kill a story. One is if it is really long and rambling. Those can be, you know, really hard and kill your story. If there are 2 or 3 endings, and what do I mean by that? I mean, oftentimes you tell a story and then, oh, and you want to add this, and you add a postscript or a second ending or a little more information. You want to have a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, not 2 endings, and clearly stop the ending. If your story doesn't feel like there's a point to it or a relevance to the moment or the situation, that can kill it. If you're being insensitive, if you're out of touch, if you're sexist or racist, that's, you know, in your storytelling, that kills me. And Mark has a friend who I sometimes see at art fairs who is just a wee bit sexist, and he knows not to tell his sexist jokes and stories around me because I just won't listen. Boring. Any boring stories are going to be, you know, you just don't need to do it. A story that doesn't have any kind of emotion, the enthusiasm, the sense of joy, surprise, delight people, or also maybe some suspense can be, you know, not as good of a story to tell. So those are some things you should avoid, the story killers. And then let's talk about some things, how to simplify your story. What should you take out if you have an important story, especially if you're going to be at an event with a lot of people, to think about how you can tell a story quickly, because there's going to be a lot of people through your tent or at the gallery. And so you want to take out all the subplots, all the asides, all the extraneous details. You also should look at how can you take away that throat clearing that we sometimes do when we start a story. So by throat clearing, I mean kind of the warm up, like, I'm about to tell you this really interesting story about the why I put this painting together using yellow paint instead of red paint. Instead, you just log in and say, this painting almost had red paint on it. And you see how that's shorter and you haven't kind of, I'm about the throat. A lot of times people will do some warm up, come and they talk and it's throat clearing. I also try to get people to think about what's unnecessarily negative in their story, any hurtful comments. It's easy to, get gossipy in your stories, but unless you know the person really well, it may be better to leave that out. Also, a lot of obvious information. If you say, it was, mid-July in Palm Springs, you don't need to tell people that it was hot and, and you were sweating like crazy, unless that's a key part of the story, the sweat. So don't give them the obvious details that they will surmise. And also, sometimes there are extra characters in your story. Your cousin Joe came with you on this camping trip to Utah, Ron, and helped you pick up a whole bunch of rocks. But for the purposes of telling the story, your cousin Joe doesn't really need to show up. So sorry, cousin, but you're not making it into this story unless you have a really important role to play. And then here's some elements you want to make sure you have in your stories. You want to have that sense of what connects you. Some people call it the universal element of the story. Everybody likes to have a story with a happy ending. There's a lot of people who would feel connected to a story about travel. A lot of people love to travel. So also you want to have, if it's a story about a problem that you solved, or you were heroics, or you overcame a problem, you'll need to give some specifics on that. What happened, how it happened. You also want to make sure that you're thinking through, why are you telling this story? Why does this story matter in this moment? Sometimes it's surmise, but not always. And if you're telling a story that doesn't seem crystal clear in the element of why you're doing it or why you're sharing it, you might need to add a line that says, I'm telling you this story because you expressed an interest in going to Africa, and this is my first trip there. So you connect it to them and give them the reason. And then your story should also always have your voice in it. And by your voice, that means your authentic, who you are, how you talk. If you like to use sentence fragments all the time, use them in your stories. If you like to use, poetic, lines of poetry in everyday life, put it in your stories. But make sure that you are putting your authentic voice in it, and no amount of editing should take that out. All right, so now I'm going to come into some tips, and we've already done this. So here's a way to figure out if your story is a good story. Practice it on strangers, and do this at a time when you're feeling, pretty good about the possibility of yourself. So sometimes I do that when I go to a coffee shop. I'll be sitting and I'll be thinking about an article I'm going to write, and maybe I've just done a bunch of research, and I'll lean over if the person's by themselves, and I'll talk to them for a minute about an element of my story, and then I pay close attention Are they interested? Are they yawning? Are they whatever? Another technique that we actually picked up when we were looking at the Night Arts Challenge is while you're in line at the supermarket, you've got a few minutes. So turn to the person and tell them, hey, hi, I'm Vicki. I'm a writer and editor and artist, and I need some practice with this story I'm working on. Could you take a minute and give me your feedback? And you'd be surprised. You're standing in line. You got nothing to do. So ask people to listen to your story and practice it on strangers, because they may give you a better reaction than your closest friends. Okay, so now we have a couple more minutes. Does anyone else want to take a minute and share a story?
All right. All right. When I was married to an artist, I wondered what kind of art I would make if I had the opportunity. But I didn't have the time or the opportunity back then to do anything about it. But when I moved from Missouri to Florida, the urge to express myself kicked in. I had always been attracted to religious, ethnic, and folkloric imagery, roadside memorials, home altars, and shrines. So I asked my husband to make me a little workspace in a corner of our garage. And I began making assemblages that remind me of Catholic reliquaries, which, if you are not familiar with those, they contain a little piece of a saint or a deity's bone or hair or something like that. And I actually saw a real reliquary at a church in St. Louis, and it just blew me away. So I don't use bones. I use a shell that looks like a bone, and I create these little portable shrines that are called shellaquaries. Actually, my husband came up with that clever name. And to me, they remind me of something a monk might have packed and carried around in his missionary work. And they inspire people to come up with their own stories. And people like to look inside of things. And I think that's part of the attraction of these pieces too. So, and in response to the pandemic, I started working on an extension of the shellaquaries called Buddhaquaries, which are based on the Buddha, naturally, and they're meant to evoke feelings of peace and joy. And I also do a series called Bad Clowns, which is based on vintage rubber clown heads. I found dozens of those in a bag in a junk shop actually a few years ago, and that really inspired me because I don't like clowns and I think they're nasty. So they depict clowns doing things and then getting their just rewards for doing those things. And they're really out there. And I also make art nativities out of vintage figures and found stuff. So everything I make uses old, discarded things, everyday odds and ends, dollar store stuff. I'm constantly picking up rusty bottle caps off of parking lots. So it took me a long time to have the confidence to call myself an artist and to overcome the feeling that that it sounds so pretentious, I'm an artist. But I've sold some pieces and won some prizes along the way. And my little corner workspace in the garage is now a quarter of the garage. So, and I love what I make and I love making it. So please visit my website, PamelaJonesArtStudio.com, and tell me what you think. That's my story.
Nice. All right. Somebody have some feedback for Pamela?
Well, I know your story, so
Well, yeah.
I know. So I think that, like Mark said at the beginning with Erica, there was a lot of stories in there. So
I guess so.
yeah, I know. I understand the desire, but you probably could make a lot of different little stories out of it. You know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yep. And I think if you want to use that as a story about how you really came into your own as an artist, and that you've got a wide variety of art, we can go back to that. Now I go from the shellaquaries to the blah blah and many of other things in between without going into as much detail, because I love the way you started this with a little corner in the garage and now having a much larger share of the garage. I thought that was a really wonderful beginning and ending detail of the story that kind of anchors it and lets people see how you've been growing as an artist, and might make them interested in seeing more of your work. But you do have to look at how you can tighten and trim the story back a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and it's believe me, it's hard work to do this. It's not easy to edit ourselves, but it's worthwhile. It's very worthwhile. And I don't know if you've written that particular one out, but if you haven't, you might want to think of writing it out, because sometimes it's easier to edit on paper. You know, as artists, I know we are tactile, we work with things, as opposed to speaking it on a video, or you may want to do video editing for yourself, but actually putting it in words and then seeing like, oh yeah, I can cut this, I can cut that.
Yeah.
Or putting it in words and, you know, writing it down and then coming up with a couple of people who are wordsmiths who will edit it for you. You know, maybe you have a really good friend who's a writer or an attorney or somebody else who's really good with words who would take a stab at helping you edit that. Angelo?
I got a little comment. I was making an observation as far as storytelling, and I was thinking that comedians, they have different styles, but when they tell their story, they get to the punchline, and usually the joke isn't like extremely long, because the audience would get like kind of bored. So they keep you on the edge, but they deliver the punchline eventually, which is like the ending to the story. And I was thinking about Eddie Murphy, Andrew, what's his name? Andrew Dice Clay. They both got different styles, but the story that they deliver is kind of short and to the point. And I was just making that comparison as to how you are laying, you know, the format out to tell a story.
So Pamela, I think the Shella Quarry story was a great piece of that, and that the other pieces were also usable, but they didn't belong in that same story. I heard the story about who you are and how you became an artist. I heard the story about the Shella Quarries. And then the clown story, I think, is a whole different story.
Oh, it certainly is. Yeah.
So,
okay. That makes sense.
And I think, you know, you can end up telling all the stories, but doing them as people indicate interest. So you're just looking at it as a continuum. You're trying to get them to respond, engage, and buy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when people are in a moment, they do want to give a lot of information about who they are and where they're going. Whereas increasingly, we just want one bite. We just want the appetizer portion. We're not going to order the full meal deal at the beginning. And I know with young writers, young journalists, oftentimes when they come to me, they're proposing to write, you know, like a novella instead of, you know, a 700-word article. And I have to tell them, let's break it down, let's cut it out, let's narrow it in and focus it. And I think that, as all of us, need that help.
Okay, thank you so much for your feedback. I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing.
Here's another piece of advice that I give people all the time. If you have an important story to share, if you're going to put it out there in the world, on your website, in a video, make sure that you give yourself enough time to work on it. Look at your story with fresh eyes. And the way to do that is the same way I'm sure you look at your art, is you make it and then you let it sit for a while. and then you come back to it and you look at it again and you see it differently, than when you first were creating it. So I highly recommend that everybody who has on the important stories, you take some time and you put it away, and you don't always look at it. I have some stories on my computer that have been there, stories and partial stories that have been there for months because of the pandemic, and the timing wasn't right for them, didn't have the right outlet. So, but they are there, and I'm going to get back to them with fresh eyes, and I'm going to see them in a way that may make them stronger and better. I also mentioned earlier that there's a lot of people who are willing to help artists do the hard work of promoting your art. So look into your collector base and see who do you know who could be your pro bono editor, who would take some time and help you with a little bit of story editing or video editing or feedback on some of your stories. Attorneys can be really good because they work with words a lot. Maybe a curator, maybe just somebody who does crossword puzzles every single day, and is and ask them. I'm sure people have time now. They would be happy to do it. So here's another quote from editing is really like plumbing a good deal of the time. You put two things together and a current runs through it. And that was by Thelma Schoonmaker, who's a film editor who worked on many, many, many movies. And I really liked it because it is sometimes putting things together. And then the current is the connection, the emotion, or the impact the story has. Well, I put together some resources, some guides for some other places to read up if you want to do some more thinking about how you can be an better editor of your work. And I think, Mark will pass this out if I don't know if he passes them out to everyone, but I always like to leave people. I work with youth artists, and I know that oftentimes they get some of the information from our workshops from Mint and not all of it. And so I try to always make sure I give them a chance to, do some more work. And these are available for you. And I really appreciate you taking the time. I am excited to help with this series. I'm sure Mark told you that we started doing the professional artists workshops back when we did them in person at the Scarab Club, after we launched the youth artists program, the Mint Artist Guild, because we had so many professional artists saying to us, we really need to be learning the things you're teaching these teenagers, these talented teenagers. So I feel like it was a wonderful opportunity for us to engage and support and encourage and help educate in small ways artists of all ages. So
I have a question.
Yes, Martin.
Is Henry Harper in the picture?
Yeah, that's Henry Harper. That's a picture on Livernois a couple weeks ago. I was looking for a good picture of me. Yeah, Henry, for those who don't know, Henry Harper is the co-founder of the Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club, a really amazing organization that connects artists and collectors and art lovers in Detroit. And they meet every Monday. Oh, I promised I would do a quick, I'm supposed to do a quick ad. If you're looking for holiday cards, check out mintartistguild.org. We have 3 kinds of holiday cards, and they support our programs that help youth artists in Detroit. We do all kinds of community art projects. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate you listening. I'm happy to, I'm really glad to be able to support you in your storytelling journeys as artists, because, stories make a huge difference in our lives, and especially in challenging times. We do need better stories and stories that evoke that sense of community and joy and beauty and connection that